G'day guys, welcome back to the channel. Now today we are here to take a look at some more trade rumours. Now I did say in the last video we did about trade rumours that I would start doing these episodes more frequent. So we're going to be starting to do this every couple of weeks because like I said, there are so many trade rumours coming out. So I want to try and cut through all the bull crap, get to the trade rumours regarding if they're true, if they're false. Of course, let me know down below what you think about the upcoming trade period and what players you think your team needs. But let's go straight into it. We'll start with one that I find quite interesting. Now, this is probably going to be something to look at in the future. However, Nick Daicos and Tasmania. Now, the reason why I think this one is being talked about to some extent is because of Gary Ablett way back in the day joining the Gold Coast Suns. Very similar situation regarding father-son player being a champion of their team and then moving for big money. Daicos would be paid a huge amount of money if he was going to Tasmania, and obviously they do have a bunch of pay packets regarding the club if you do join. Nick Daicos was surprisingly actually asked this question from Sam McClure, and his response was a little bit interesting. He did say he would never rule anything out. Now, of course, he doesn't have any plans to move, I wouldn't imagine, and I would be extremely surprised if Nick Daicos did move from Collingwood because they're such a big club, of course. They're such a recognisable club, and he's probably the most famous AFL footballer. So to leave the club to go to somewhere like Tasmania, I think that would be a bridge too far. But of course, he would be offered a huge amount of money to join the club, probably be their captain as well. So I think it's one to keep in mind in the next couple of years, but I would be extremely surprised if that did eventuate. Now, sticking with the Pies, Brody Mihocek has been offered a new contract to stay at the club, but is likely to park negotiations as interest for experienced key forwards will be seen from other clubs at this stage. Again, this is similar to Nick Daicos in a way that I can't see him leaving. However, I wouldn't be too surprised if a couple of clubs go at him, maybe a North Melbourne, because they do need someone to help Nick Larkey. I don't really know why they picked up Jack Darling, to be honest, but I think that Brody Mihocek will stay put. But if they are wanting to move experienced players on Collingwood this year, maybe Mihocek would be one to move, but I still would highly doubt it. Now, Darcy Cameron has been circulating on rumours for quite a while now. The two teams that keep on poking up are Carlton and West Coast. Now, Cal Toomey has said that he is underpaid and could be paid a lot of money to join a rival club, and at this stage he is not really close to a extension by any means necessary, and he is out of contract next season. Now, more reports are linking him to saying that he does not want to leave, that he wants to stay at the Pies, but of course the offer that he would be getting at Collingwood is probably unders compared to what his value actually is. I don't see him leaving either. I think that he will stay at the club. If Collingwood are going to lose players, I think in the next couple of years, it's going to be either fringe players or it's going to be very experienced players through retirement, or maybe, we did talk about it last episode regarding Jeremy Howe potentially moving to North Melbourne because he would maybe want to move into a coaching role there. So that's probably another avenue that some experienced players will look at on Collingwood's point of view if they do decide to leave. However, I think Darcy Cameron will be definitely staying. Now, Oscar Allen, of course, is out for the rest of the season now through the injury that occurred about a month or so ago. However, according to Tom Morris, it does seem that the injury that he'd sustained for the West Coast Eagles has changed nothing on the plans for the Brisbane Lions. They believe they can still get the best out of Oscar. So I think Hawthorn dropped away. They don't want to have anything to do with Oscar Allen. So at this stage, I think it's a two-horse race, West Coast or Brisbane. And at the moment, I think he's leaving. I think he's going to be going to the Lions next year. Now, an interesting one that popped up regarding Cal Toomey and St Kilda's captain in Jack Steele. Now, he thinks that there are going to be clubs looking at Jack Steele in the next couple of months going into the next trade period. And honestly, I wouldn't be too surprised if Jack Steele is pried out of the club. To be honest, I think that Cal Wilkie should be their captain, and I think that they could put some younger midfielders that can do a pretty similar role to Jack Steele. And I think to get the best out of him, it could be at a club that's maybe a top 6 club in the competition that needs some more midfield depth. I wouldn't be surprised if clubs start to look at him, but it would be a big deal if a club captain does get taken out of someone's club. Now, sticking with the Saints, Nasiah Wanganeen-Milera, he's been around the news for a very long time. We obviously talked about last episode that Caroline Wilson came out with that story regarding him and the Adelaide Crows not wanting to go there because of Taylor Walker's racial incident a couple of years ago. However, Caroline Wilson has came out again and has said that it does seem the feeling in South Australia is that St Kilda are pretty confident that they have got Nasiah Wanganeen-Milera. Now, at this stage, it looks like they're more confident on him signing on a short-term deal, probably to get into free agency and then see where it goes. I wouldn't be too surprised if he does stay on a short-term deal, similar to what maybe Chad Warner did with the Sydney Swans, that he signs a short-term deal, get into free agency, and then and see if there's any more money for a home state for him to sign on a massive deal. That's probably where we're looking with Nasiah. Now, Sam Flanders, of course, it was a couple of years ago, you may remember, that he was being looked at by Victorian clubs. Richmond were heavily linked to him. However, he did decide to stay at the Gold Coast. But with his recent role changing from 2024, where he's playing predominantly half-back, a little bit of midfield, he's moved to more of a half-forward position, and it doesn't really suit his game. So there have been a couple of rival clubs looking at him, wanting to give him more midfield time, and the club that is being linked to him at this stage is St Kilda. St Kilda are probably going to be linked to a lot of players going into this trade period. We've got one more to cover in a moment, but Sam Flanders is contracted until 2027, so he'll definitely have to request a trade. I think the Gold Coast will want to keep him, but keep an eye out on Sam Flanders. Could potentially be pried out of the Gold Coast, especially with a couple of draftees they're still looking to pick up in this year's draft. Will Sam Flanders be inevitably pushed out of the team? And finally, on the Saints, we've got Leek. Now, he's been linked to Brisbane, Carlton in previous times. However, according to John Ralph with the Herald Sun, he's saying that the Saints currently lead. Now, Leek has been in the Giants 22 as a mainstay over the last month or so because of injuries to Sam Taylor and just form that he's had at the VFL level. But it doesn't seem like he's going to be a regular team player. He seems sort of on the periphery, so I think he's going to be leaving at the end of the year. Now, a couple of Ruckman we have talked about in previous episodes regarding Draper and Sean Darcy. The offer from Essendon to the Draper camp wasn't as good as they were expecting, which has opened the door for the likes of the Adelaide Crows and Brisbane. Draper was linked to Brisbane a lot more a couple of weeks ago. They are looking to hopefully have someone to match up with Oscar McInerney, but I don't really know if that's really the move for Draper. I think the Crows would be a better move for him on his career. If Essendon can hold him, I think they would like to. However, maybe they are keeping an eye out on Fremantle's Sean Darcy. So Ryan Daniels on Triple M did say to keep an eye out for Sean Darcy, potentially moving to Essendon if Draper was to leave. I think there could be a domino effect on the Ruckman this year in the market, because I think if De Koning leaves, then Carlton will want a Ruckman. If that domino does fall or Draper does decide to move, then we could have even see the likes of Darcy move on. And another one as well is Luke Jackson, who has been linked to Geelong. I don't think this one will happen. I think Jackson will stay at Fremantle. I think out of the two, Ruckman, Darcy and Jackson is most likely to stay in my opinion, but he is still being linked to the Cats. But it does seem that, according to the player manager of Sean Darcy in Scott Lucas, it does seem that Fremantle are very invested in the two Ruckmen to go work together. Fremantle they think their way to move forward is to go with two recognised Ruckmen, play up forward. Jackson can obviously play a little bit of midfield as well, but we'll just have to wait and see. Now, Clayton Oliver has obviously been around the mark over the last few months regarding a potential move from Melbourne to maybe just see some greener pastures, get a new lease on his football career. He has been linked to Geelong. I wouldn't be too surprised if he does leave at the end of this year. I think that the future of the Demons midfield is the likes of Langford and Lindsay. Clayton Oliver, Petrarca and Viney is not the real midfield that they need for the current age of football, which makes me believe that maybe Clayton Oliver will be pushed out. But now we're moving into a lot more of the Cats players that they are targeting. Now, Sam Walsh, according to Cal Toomey as well, he has said that Geelong is already making waves about getting him back to their area. I would be a little bit surprised on that front. I think he is their next captain, but he will be linked, of course, being out of contract next year. James Worpel is another one, according to Mitch Cleary on the Agenda Setters. He is being linked to Melbourne as well, but Geelong continue to look in the market for a player like James Worpel. And probably the big ones, in my opinion, are Harley Reid and Zak Butters. Now, Harley Reid, in more recent times, seems a little bit more connected to staying at the West Coast Eagles on the short term, and then maybe look in the future to potentially moving back to Victoria. So I think that one won't go ahead at this stage. Zak Butters is one that I think will be interesting moving forward. He has spoken on his future. Despite being under contract at Albert until the end of next year, Butters has earned a lot of interest from Victorian clubs. And speaking to the media this week, Butters says he has his focus on the football at this moment, but did concede that he'll have to assess his options in the off-season. So I think if you heard that as a Port fan, you wouldn't be too impressed, I would say. I think he will stay. I think that we have seen the last few months a lot of Port Adelaide players signing, and Miles Bergman was a big get for them to keep him at the club. So I do think that Zak Butters will stay, and maybe he's trying to just get a little bit more money out of the Power. I feel like if he's already assessing his options, that's not a great sign. I still think he will stay though, but just definitely keep your eye out. That could be the biggest move of the trade period if Zak Butters decides to leave. Now, Aaron Aaron Cadman has been talked about. Cal Toomey does say that he thinks that Geelong will be all over him when he does come out of contract in the next couple of years. I wouldn't be too surprised either. But I think the Giants are heavily invested in Aaron Cadman long term. We saw that they jumped up the draft just to get this guy, and it seems like now they're just seeing the rewards come through. Now, finally, on the Giants' point of view, Grusevski is a player at the Giants who's been gaining a lot of interest from rival clubs. Now, at this stage, it doesn't seem like we know exactly what clubs are looking at him, but it is one of those players on the periphery, on the outer at the Giants that could be looking to go elsewhere. We've already talked about Leek. Wade Dirksen is one as well who was linked in the last trade period to leave the Giants. He did stay, but it looks like he is still looking to move away. But the Giants, I do think, have to hold a lot of these players to contracts, because if they continue to lose these role players, it's just going to make it very difficult for them to stay up the top long term, because we've seen for so many years now, we've seen a lot of clubs when they rely on their stars and they don't have that underbelly of role players, that they do drop down the ladder pretty quickly. Carlton, a prime example. Now, on the Sydney Swans, so Jamara has been linked to the Swans for a long time. Now, we saw in a recent podcast with Mitch Robinson and Reece Matheson that he wants to stay at the Dogs. He wants to repay the faith that they have shown him. However, Leon Cameron, when questioned regarding the Swans looking at the potential targets this trade period, he did say he would be pretty disappointed in his list management and recruiting department if they aren't looking at all options, because we need to improve the list. Jamara, I would be very surprised if he stays at the Dogs at the end of the year. I can't see them repairing that relationship. I think that it's good to see that he is starting to improve his self-worth as well. I think that he was definitely going down a very dark path, though it is very good to see that he is going down the right direction, it seems. Sydney may be the right option, I don't know. I just would be very surprised if he stays at the Dogs. Even if he does want to stay, I don't know if that relationship can be repaired. We'll just have to wait and see. Now, one that I think is highly doubtful is regarding Joe Daniher. Now, you may remember this, I think it was in 2019 when the Swans were looking at Joe Daniher. Caroline Wilson is saying that we keep hearing words regarding the Swans trying to get Joe Daniher out of retirement. I just think this is not going to happen, and I don't really like the idea of the Swans fan either. He's been out of the game for a whole year. I just think it's not the right move. And according to Chris Fagan, he heard the reports, and when asked questions regarding it, Fagan was adamant that it would not come to fruition. He said, "I'm pretty sure that will never happen." I'm sure he has some sort of contact with Joe, and I mean, I just can't see this happening, and I don't think it's a good idea for Sydney. I don't think it's the right route to go down. Hopefully they don't do this, but it is a rumor that I did want to bring to the channel. I think it's got a lot of mayo on it. I'll just put it that way. And the last trade rumor I wanted to take a look at is regarding Zane Duursma. This is the younger brother of Xavier Duursma. There is a younger brother in the draft pool this year, but Zane, according to reports from Lee Montagna, is saying that he's not sure whether the club and him are in love with each other at the moment. So who knows if he looks to go elsewhere. He's been a fringe player for North for a few years now since being drafted. He did play on Thursday night in the centenary game for North Melbourne and had a decent performance, but it just doesn't seem that he's getting the best out of North Melbourne. I wouldn't be surprised if he does look to move elsewhere. Maybe a reunion with his brother at Essendon wouldn't be too bad. I think that would be a nice move. It just depends on the price. I feel like he would have to go for a first round draft pick because North Melbourne invested, I think it was a top 10 pick for him. Will clubs want to pay up for a player that hasn't shown a lot at AFL level yet? We just have to wait and see. So finally, this isn't really any trade rumors, but there are 14 players that could be targeted by rival clubs that are sort of on the fringe of their team at the moment. This is according to Fox Footy. So from Hawthorn, we've got Henry Huswaite, Sam Frost, and Jai Sarong. For Essendon, we have Elijah Sardis and Dylan Shield. For the Bulldogs, we have Jed Buslinger and Riley Garcia. For Collingwood, we have Tom Mitchell, of course, the veteran. And then for the Gold Coast, we have quite a few. We have Connor Butterick, Braden Fiorini, Alex Davies, Malcolm Roses, Lloyd Johnston, and Ned Moyle. Now, I wanted to take a little bit of a look at Ned Moyle because I think this guy is being shunned by the AFL at the moment. He is one of the best VFL ruckmen, and he's stuck behind, unfortunately, one of the former captains of the Gold Coast Suns. So it's pretty hard for him to break through. I can't believe there's not many clubs looking at this guy. He would go on the cheap, they could pick him up, and he is a first team starter every week. I think that this guy should be targeted by a lot of teams in the AFL. I think that teams that are looking for a ruckman should be looking at Ned Moyle. But we just have to wait and see. It seems like he's been sort of forgotten about in more recent times, but I think that's the guy you build around through a midfield. I think if Carlton do lose Tom Nakoning, which looks kind of inevitable at this point, that their first target, if they can't get a Darcy Cameron, is Ned Moyle. And I think more clubs should be looking at him. On the other players on the fringe here, I think a lot of them will be looking elsewhere this year. We did see Sam Frost was linked to the Sydney Swans last trade period, decided to stay. Wouldn't be surprised if that's maybe reignited in the next trade period. I think Elijah Sardes is probably the big one there. That is having very good VFL form, but just can't break into a regular spot in the Essendon AFL side. So I'd keep your eye on that one as well. But guys, it's basically all the trade rumours we have over the last couple of weeks. Make sure to let me know down below the trade rumours you believe are true, what you think are absolutely false. Make sure to let me know down in the comment section below. And guys, if you haven't checked out the latest video essay, we talk about the most loved and most hated players in the AFL. You can check that out here right now.